Ladies and gentlemen, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're based. Today with us, we have quite a special person. His name is Robert Bunch, and I'll give you a very brief intro right now as we speak, but I will also introduce him once he joins on this podcast. Robert is a very particular case and a case that's very close to my heart because Robert deals a lot with counterterrorism issues, right? So he was a former Deputy Chief Office of Inspector General at the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA. He has a long career of over 25 years in counterintelligence, and he should be joining us shortly for us to discuss counterterrorism. Hi, Robert. Thanks for joining. Ladies and gentlemen, today's guest has spent more than 3 decades on the front lines of the U.S. security, so America's security. Robert has been a Marine Recon Corpsman and has worked his way to Counterterrorism Program Manager at the Department of Defense. Robert has 15 years inside the CIA and has led teams where mistakes can cost lives and decisions pretty much shape history. Robert now is the CEO of his own consulting, ABY Consulting. He's redefining force development and security innovation for a new era of global threats. And I hope this is a conversation that's going to be discussing leadership under pressure, failure of intelligence, and the human cost of counterterrorism. Robert, floor's on you.
Hey, it's good to meet you, Alex. How are you doing, buddy?
Doing good. Thanks for asking.
Hey, is the lighting good in here? Because it just got cloudy. I can do 75.
Yeah, that's fine. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Robert, it's a great honor having you on this. I have many questions to ask. I'm slightly anxious about this interview as well. So I do apologize in advance. So my first question from the get-go is, you've served in the Marines and you led counterterrorism programs, worked in the CIA. Which one of those was the most demanding for you and why?
Well, let me get some light here. Sorry about that. No, each one had their unique challenge, of course. The most demanding mentally was definitely CA, I understand. The most demanding physically was between the elite guy and then the good kid. Those were demanding both physically and mentally, but CA was not demanding at all, not at all. It was demanding navigating the of what our mission set was and then how we achieve that. And come from a specialized community and fitting yourself thrust into an environment of people who are not from that community, who are Ivy people. Whenever I was doing that was not a trajectory that I expected to do. I fell into it, and it was cool. But basically, Marine Recon is the equivalent of like the SEALs or Green Berets or something like that. And when you get into that environment, you are thinking, I'm going to have to fight and fight good, both fist fight and gunfight and swimming and rowing and push-ups and all this other stuff. That's what you thought you would get into, but the quality that they look for, and I didn't understand this on the front end, was to be able to solve problems. That was it. To be a problem solver. And then after I'd been there in operational capacity, and then had to screen, assess, and train guys to do the special operations mission. That's what I was looking for. Somebody to solve problems. And efficiency is key. And that was lost CA, at least during my 15 years there. And you have to understand, on my 15 years there, I was, joined in '06. We're in the middle of a global war on terror. And so operational tempo was accelerated. And you had the majority of the workforce were Cold War era, where instead of going out and being kinetic on target, it was cocktail parties and things like that. And so you had to galvanize the relationship between those two mindsets. And it was a struggle to be harmonious in that environment.
I can imagine.
Yeah. So it was unique. But getting down to the point of we have a problem solved, we're solving. And I'm completely open to group thing. That's fine. But whenever you have 40 different voices coming at you, you're all wanting to choose the same objective. But once you start talking about inventory or the kill catcher, partial rescue, or something like that, now you're in my world. So at that point, you don't have to even being a junior guy when I join, it has to allow me to weigh in. I'm going to have some buy-in on this. And if your only solution to this problem is fallible, then I will point that out. And the converse of that, if mine is fallible,
I'm all ears, dude. It's better to be interested than interesting. So I would love to hear your solution to it. And I think it's very important for you to take that approach and not get butthurt or not get into, for lack of a better phrase, an ego debate and sort of just be open. And one of the things I found that once you get into that world, uh, if you said something, if somebody came with the best solution in their mind to a problem, and you look at it through a practical lens, and you're like, okay, I disagree based on this premise or these premises. Typically, they would add to this,
Mhm.
but then you've made an enemy for life. It's because they're like, this guy just pumped me out. So that was the difference between being a special operator in the military and managing a counterterrorism program and then going to CIA.
Wow. Wow. Why counterterrorism? Why'd you choose counterterrorism, or what attracted you with counterterrorism?
Well, this is it, man. It shows me. I was got out of the military because there was nothing going on. And I'd already gone through, I'd done the screen to be a recon guy. And then in went to school, Army Airborne School, Marine Combat Dive School, Commando School, did a couple of teams. And so I did operations for a while. And then they pulled me back and wanted me to start training guys. And so I was doing that. But we had nothing going on. Our primary, as I said at the time, was counter narcotics. And so
Mhm.
that's what we were doing. But my platoon, because I was training guys, but I was spinning like a two at the same time. We were Bravo Company, and we had full contingent after Bravo, Charlie, and Delta. We were Bravo Company. Charlie Company was in Bosnia, and so we were slated to go to Bosnia. And that was going to be in 24 months. And that mission set was died down. Delta Force, the SEALs, they had it. And so basically, I would just sit around doing nothing. Just training with dudes. We weren't out of the point. And so I made a decision. I was like, we didn't have children at that time. And I made the decision. I was like, I'm going to get out. So I got out. And the plan was to go to college and then go to law school. And I was in college and working at a law firm. And now that that. And there was a guy that I went to college with. But he was something called a SWIFT. No, they are. Are you familiar with that? Those are the guys who, and I'm not trying to shit on these cats, so don't think that way. But basically, they drop the seals off. They're the taxi drivers for sure, and but they are phenomenal. They are some of the best of the world at that job, and they are the gunfighters. And people will shit on, and I'm not saying it through that lens because I think they're phenomenal operators. But a buddy of mine had done that job, and then he was on college together. But that's more Reading actually, and he reached out to me and said, "Hey, there's a counterterrorism gig that popped up. Would you be interested?" And I was 2001, so I was only putting on, and I was like, "Yeah, dude." And so I started doing that. So I got into counterterrorism, doing that, and it was something that specific mission set was something that I'd never done before, but I was there for maybe 6 months. And then they asked me to take over your program. And so I took it over. And you brought in some damn that guy, which damn it, special things just guys, some other recon dudes, a couple of Rangers. I think we have done PJ there, military last student. But no, a phenomenal program, dude. Best job I ever had. Next to recon, best job I ever had. And think about it. You're walking around in a pair of Vans and shorts and a t-shirt, and all you're doing all day is shooting and fighting. Mm, it was awesome. But I did that from late '01 to '06 till I got hired by the CA. And the only reason why it turned a rat wall is I was a junior in college, as crazy as that sounds, at 34 or no, 29 whenever I got hired. And it just before you had online learning and we're always traveling. And so uh college, I pumped the brakes on there. And then whenever we had laws, I would just crush classes. And finally got my degree. And once I got my degree, I applied for CA and went to counterterrorism yet. And came up here.
All of that as an experience, and you now transitioning from what I would imagine into the private sector. What's the main difference between, let's say, your times at the Marines or CIA with working now with the private sector? So, how does your current consultancy gig work with the private sector?
That's a very interesting question because when you're doing the consulting, like what I did, it's my last job at CA. When I came to CA, the first job I did was when I initially applied, I applied for the military, and they're like, "Yep, so that's what I thought I was going to be doing." And then when I came out, they're like, "Yeah, you're not qualified for that." And they're like, change that." And so there were four different jobs I could have done. One would be a background investigator. The second one was to be a telegrapher. The third one was to be an juice apprentice. And the fourth one would be something called a ERS guy, roller spots. That, and I don't know if you've seen the movie 13 Hours, but it's those guys. And that was what I was best suited for. Then I said, okay, I'll be that. That's what I'll do. And I want to, and I didn't know anybody at HC at the time. And there was Lato Sticks. I went on a trip. And I found I was a CA officer, but I did not have a career. I hadn't started a job yet, but I was, as far as a career path. But I went to Baghdad. Then when I got there, I wanted to go meet the dudes that I was be working with. So I went down to their shop, and as soon as I walked in the door, the first thing I saw was the guy I was in recon with, and they had done two commandos for him, and you didn't know why. And so we were homies. I didn't even know he was up there, but he's like, "Do not do this, man. Trust me, I'm on nurse number 3. You don't want to do this job." And I was like, "What do you do?" And he said, "You'll do backgrounds." And I was like, "I don't know anything about that shit." I was like, "Dude, trust me, really that we'll get more exposure to the aces during that." And so when I came back to the States, it was the summer of both sticks. I left in October, came back into Syria, but I came back and I talked to my program manager, and I was like, "Hey, I'm not very that gay. I want to go do backgrounds." And so that's what I did. So I spent 18 months doing that. And then after that, I left and started doing protected work. And I had to go through those forces. And so I did that for 5 years. And there, our dogs weren't been there assigned, and I needed to come off the road, man. So I came off the road and I went to work for internal affairs. And then the last job I did at AC, I went to the inspector general's office, and they had a requirement they never get certified as a federal agent. And I was not a federal agent, wanting a federal agent, but that was able finally. And it was a good job. So I went and got certified as a federal agent. And then I did that for, I think I was doing it for like 3 years. And then they made me a deputy chief for a division managing a team of federal agents. And I did that for 5 years after that. And then in 2021, I left. And leaving with that background, and there is nothing special about me. On paper, it looks pretty full, but a monkey could do the jobs that I've done well. And it's not a heavy lift, but getting into my own company, ABY, and ABY is an acronym for always beside you. That's the recon, part of the recon thing. Is if you're looking at a brother, I'm always beside you. So that's why I mean with that. But with a diverse background, I give head up. I mean, I've got a woman, a boss, or not all these. She won't really build a safe room for her in her house. I've got a client in Los Angeles that very wealthy that she went on vacation. She went to Curacao, and her came back and she had like $1 million worth of goods in her house that were missing. And she thought
A lot of money.
yeah, and she thought it was her maid to get it, and she wanted me to come out and investigate. I was like, "Do you have it on camera?" And she's like, "Yeah." I was like, "There's not a lot to investigate." So what do you know her? Well, can you come and talk to her? And I was like, 100%. I would come and walk to her. Family tap her phone. And then another guy in conjunction with that, they had hired him as well. It's like we're looking at Title III violation. Title III, it's intercepting communications in the United States, specifically listening on phone call, and it's constitutional violation or orphan. And so they're spun up on that, and the approach I took was to solve that problem and to bring a voice of sanity. Last function, I was like, this is not a Title III issue at all because we're not to settle as other men. If we were to settle them, then it would be a penalty. But I would anticipate if you're in San Diego and your maze is Hispanic, there she's propping the illegal and you're paying for her cell phone. And the woman's like, yeah. I said, well, you can listen on those cell phone calls all day long. And it's not a Title III violation. So it's things like that that you don't know what you're getting. I'll get a phone call from somebody, hey, do you want to go to Gaza to be this? Or do you want to go to Haiti to do this? Or do you want to go to Maine to do this? And so
having the burst back now, if it sounds cool and that there will be so many jobs open and people knocking at your door, but it's a struggle to find or a niche to if they need you to interrogate people, if they need you to protect people, if they need you to build a safer for you. There's not a lot of people that need that stuff, but when they do need that, like my phone, man, it's on audible. Well, it's not audible right now, but because I don't want to interrupt our time together. But when they're about to play, they know that they can call me, and I don't care what time it is, man. They're not getting a dead phone. So it's a unique space to be in. I'm still trying to establish it.
Sounds like a fantastic space to be in and a consistent challenge to be in. And Robert, you worked in one of the most predominant and best sort of organizations in the world. From your experience, what's one of the most misunderstood aspect of working in intelligence and defense that the public or Hollywood, for example, always gets wrong? Is it the amount of bureaucracy, for example? Is it something else?
Well, there is no Jason Bourne out there. Those guys just don't exist. I think the biggest misunderstanding in working in intelligence is that it is apolitical. It's completely political. For me, whenever I was doing protective work, I was protecting the director of CA, the deputy director of CA, the director of national intelligence, and the deputy director of national. And whenever they would, if I wasn't traveling overseas, I would be at the White House every morning. And I would draw them off. I'd sit outside of something called West Gazette. It's right outside of West Wing, and they would get in the car. I would hear one of the principals and their aides get in the car, and they would talk about the whatever the discussion was. But it was always at that time. It was always Secretary of State. It was the president first of all. Very rare was vice president. The Secretary of State, National Security Advisor, with State Department, DOD, and CA. And what the president would always say is, first, diplomacy, state, how can the red is, Secretary of State, how can the is, right? Diplomacy is off the table. Defense, how can you narrow this? And that's one with you, we're playing. But one of the implications on the back then, if we have to use force, and at that one about option, he wouldn't ask the intelligence community if they can handle it. You could just say if there's state said interpreters, if that said that one Bible, you got his handle. So it got dumped on a lap. And so I would do that. When they're in the back seat talking about it, I would do that. I knew how the meeting went down. I knew what the path forward they didn't want to be. And then I'd be at home that night watching the news, and the way it got framed was completely different. And it was geared towards the political narrative that whatever administration was in office wanted to create. And so that was challenging. I mean, I still remember in May, whenever we got in line, I think it was May 2011, May 2nd, 2011, I believe. I was at the White House that morning, and I've heard these guys after we dropped the man off, he got in the car, and they started talking about, hey, we're getting Bin Laden tonight. And so they were talking about it, and went on, and I have the next day off, but went home, and I like it, that's what I say. And we're laying in bed, and I'm asleep. And my wife, she's awake, she was watching TV, and she wakes me up, and she's like, this is what happened. I was like, they got their life. So how'd you know? I was like, I knew that yesterday. So no, it's an easy little thing. So when you're operating in that world, you know things that are going to happen before they're happening. You're aware of things that are most likely going to happen. Nothing's a slam dunk, but the end of those cards, hearing that and being in briefings, the political narrative shifts based on what administration is in office, and so that it is what it is. It's just a job. We have to accept that and just.
No, I get that. It is what it is. I just think that, and I may be wrong in this because, of course, I don't know the insights of it, but I would think that an organization that big would, especially when it comes to counterterrorism, and especially with recent history in the U.S., such an organization would go for preemptive, so proactively work into operations and sort of try to assess and take away threats before they even become threats. So I just wanted your 2 cents and see if it is something that in general is a practice or if it's not. They don't do that, but they are ready when the case. Do they project, for example, counterterrorism issues that might happen in the next 10, 20, 30 years, and do they deal with it?
They try to, but you have to understand further time. And I'm not here to shit on CIA at all, but having been there for 50 years, I'm 50 years old, so I've been on the block a couple of times. Well, CIA, again, I have 2 to 4. And as far as being productive, if people are willing to do that, be objective, realists, and be honest to themselves, they'll know that the adversary also thinks that they're untouchable and they have unfettered access and unfettered budget, that they can do whatever they want to do. In Cuba, this has been reported, so I'm not gonna, anything we're talking about is not, it's already been reported. There's something called a first time unauthorized disclosure. And if you were to leak something and you're the first person to leak it, then yeah, you can get rolled up. But if the news has already discussed this, then you and I can talk about it. So it's fine. But there was something called the Havana syndrome. And basically, they were using directive energy. And everybody knows who sponsors Cuba. Havana, Cuba is what I'm talking about. Havana, Cuba is owned by the Russians, or Cuba is owned by the Russians. We do have quasi there, and now we've opened up trade with Cuba, but you've got the Havana thing in. And why I'm taking this out is that about people think they're always right and they know everything, and especially in the intelligence community, but they were using direct energy to basically harass people. And that's basically has to be termed for ruining years. So they would do this, and that technology was supplied to the Cubans by Russia. And it was most likely the Russians who were actually the people who were doing it on the ground in Cuba. So they were doing that, and they shut down operations. CIA shut down operations in Cuba. They brought people back to the U.S. And no, it is what it is. People want to start out with rendering the gears, and I don't think that the Russians had that technology harnessed at that field. And then, no, people suffered ill effects from it. It was bad. There was a guy that was down there, and it started out with tinnitus, and I think he's dead now. But we ended up his medical charges went deaf, went blind, and basically his condition was degenerating. So you fast forward, and my neighbor was he was high up, and exponentially higher up than I would say, and he was in charge of the program to combat that. And whenever America thinks that they're the best at everything, and I'm not shitting on America at all, I'm a patriot, but I think my career reflects that. But whenever they always want to do right and they think of everything, but I was talking to the neighbor, and he's retired from CIA right now, but he was in charge of the program to combat that, and he was like, you know, I put these people on my injury. I was on, did they be? They're not malingering. No, we've got, when I was in the inspector general office, we had case after case after case. It's legitimate. And you have to look at, you have to follow the evidence. And in time when I would be an investigation, the first thing I would always do with a subject, I would try to be, I would like to prove that innocence. And the reason, and it took longer than a typical investigation, but the reason why I would take that approach is if I can't prove their innocence, then now we got something. If I can't prove they're innocent, then now we're going to go through the guilt. And I didn't get an investigation a year, 3 years in a row, because I was, for lack of a better phrase, I was a doubter. But that's the way I approached it. And I was talking to my neighbor, he was a great guy in the shop, and he's like, trying to think they're remembering. To me, what that reflected was he was taking that approach because they're unaware of that technology that the Russians are using. So if we don't know about it, that means that we can't combat it. That means that we can't develop it. That means we can't use it. So no, fuck those guys. Oh, that doesn't exist. These people are lingering. It's an ego thing. It's a very egocentric approach to how do you solve problems, which I'm not on.
That's insane to hear. All of this was insane to hear. Okay, cool. Let me ask something else. In intelligence, yeah, of course. Yeah, sure. So my question was, how do you train teams to make critical decisions under extreme uncertainty?
Well, everything is uncertain. I'm doing it for uncertain. First of all, I'm not at all. Clearly find goals. And then within whatever you're trying to achieve, put someone, you put you to manage other people. Who's best equipped to handle X, Y, Z as far as who is best equipped to handle the strategy
with tactics. That's what you do. Then have them have someone support them. And so basically, you break people and tell them what the objective is, have fairly defined expectations, roles, and then you guys go forth and do God's work. And if you need help, I'm here. If you fuck yourself, I'm definitely going to hold you accountable for it. But I've got your top cover.
Usually teams the same way. Some of my friends call it a very decentralized approach. Some others call it a very libertarian approach. But I like the concept. If you fuck things up, I'm here. But up until then, leave me alone.
Yeah, I mean, it's you're balancing nature versus nurture. So you're being both mom and dad at the same time.
How do you balance accountability and operational secrecy in I mean, when you manage like this? Because you're not managing in the private sector, of course, you're managing in the Central Intelligence Agency. So how do you manage that?
It's not hard, and the reason why I say it would work is it's just really coming out and we're traveling. I was the cool guy shooting, but on the fact, may have been the most beneficial out of that as far as how you can balance your city and how you don't. And that's why I said that in pre-call when you and I were talking, or pre-interview, here I'm talking, and I said that about if you ever meet somebody that says, "No, I can tell you, not to tell you," definitely are bullshit. They didn't know when they done that. The people that I will I never like to say I manage people. I led people. And what coming from the background or spending the time being investigating leaks, unauthorized disclosure, classified information, I knew where the bounds were and where the bounds were. And there would be times we needed to have conversations with a U.S. attorney. And if there was a program that individual, and we all at least I enjoy a very harmonious relationship with Justice and U.S. Attorney's Office. But I knew what I couldn't tell them, and establishing that relationship on a front end, the people that I was leading, the individuals that worked with me, that I was responsible for, they saw how I behave, what I said, what I did and said, with people who, even though they were stakeholders regarding a specific situation, there are certain things that we cannot disclose to them. It's almost osmosis. I don't know different person way I can describe it, that they would know what to say and what not to say. But it's like that you know, I was talking earlier about what any client I have, they know if they call on me, it's like I got a way to go to a week from today. And if they call it delaying, I'll step aside. They're not giving a good phone. Same thing with the men and women who I was responsible for, is they cluttered up to a problem where they did not know what they could talk about, what could the team talk about. Call me, call my dad, man. I don't want their parents, but I'm responsible for them. But no, call me, the more solve that problem. I've never had in my 7 years at the Kentucky Sheriff's Office when I was managing people, or when I was doing while I was leading people, or whenever I was doing protective bureau, then I was a manager there as well. But I was an assistant supervisor, especially there. Not the same thing. If I can have a guy in wherever in the Middle East one day to in a thing that brought it up with something, and we're 8 hours apart in time zones. Come to the shit if it's 3 o'clock in the morning that you're running into something on me, man, and we can solve that problem. And I think this ability that they had in my ability to ride them on top cover can be given them accurate guidance, good dividends. So you cut the noose now and cut the rope and let them go do their thing, knowing that you the court them with the best decision making until it becomes time where they brought up to a problem if they don't know how to handle it, that they can call it.
I see. I see. Let me shift a little bit because I don't want to take too much time here. Focusing a little bit into counterterrorism and global security. Given the evolution of global threats, what keeps you awake at night in 2025 that didn't exist 15 years ago, for example?
Critical infrastructure.
Go on.
Right. So whenever, and I hate political, but when Biden, have you ever heard of something called accelerationism?
No.
Right, so accelerationism is, and again, I haven't been on Congress, all places I've not been, Australia, I've been everywhere else. The scariest thing, I grew up in Memphis, the scariest thing to me is that is it. It's not blacks, it's Muslims, it's not Hispanics, the cartels. It's a crazy white war. That is by far the scariest thing on the planet, and you have something called accelerationism. And what it is white supremacists trying to create a race war in the United States. But the theory is that if we lose power, then people will lose their minds, basically.
And when I first heard that, I was like, I don't think that's a premise that we should lean into. But then thinking about, I quoted about, everybody spends most of the day like this, glued to their phone. And if you don't have a way to charge your phone or don't have a way to have access to power today, it is going to cause mass chaos in the United States. That's what acceleration is. And that's what acceleration is going to do. It's like the Crown Boys and KKK and shit like that. I'm like that, gray hair, blue eyes. But that is something that concerns me. And when I got certified because it's federal agent, they didn't get hard on that. I was looking at more fee, and I didn't know if that was an asset. I'm very glad I did. But I didn't buy in to what they were saying about the white supremacy and the sovereign citizen from the United States. I don't know if that's global, but in the United States at least. But I had a client reach out, we're in August, reach out in February, and with the largest transformer manufacturer in North America, not only the United States, but the Twin Canada, Mexico, United States, Mexico, was out, and he was wanting security. I was like, all right, man, it's easy real about. We can do it comprehensive. We can do it however we want to do it. But once I started looking at is why does this 80-year-old dude also want security? Well, he's running security because it's probably just that super value. Basically, the reason this company got super value is under the Trump administration, they came down to the earlier administration, they came down and then stop buying transformers. Basically, a transformer is out explaining to somebody, oh, they they were like, oh, you're talking about the Moody. And I was like, no, I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the transformer that provides electrical supply to different places. In the United States, there are 5,500 transformers. This is the ship of teaching out in Melbourne. And he bought a ship ton of transformers from China. Trump came down and his advisors, he thought that the Chinese might have placed something in there that they could remote control these transformers. Either kill the power or turn them onto incendiary devices. And so Trump was like, fuck yes, man. No, we're not buying any more transformers to China. In the last round of severe fires in the Californians, there was speculation that one of the transformers out there was a Chinese transformer that they had planted something incendiary in it, incendiary, not get condescending, but to your viewers, it's going to be something called in your fire. So it looks going to cause fire. It's not like to make our mom, but it is thematic. But the theory was that fire was started by, and I believe at the time, California had the 8th orange colony in the New Orleans. So even though it sits in the United States, it had a huge economy. Well, if you have all these fires, I know ate up Los Angeles, they're thinking that it was due to an incendiary device that was sparked by a Chinese transformer. Well, then you have the accelerationists to see that, and so what they want to do, they want to go out and attack transformers because if people don't have power, they don't have an iPods, their food in their refrigerator is full of and like for me, last power outage we had here in my hometown, I go out to my truck. So they go on, charge my phone through my truck. Well, you don't only do that for maybe selling shit out in your truck, in your car, however you're charging them. If you don't have power in your home, you have to go in your gas station to fill up. Well, if the whole power grid is shut down, you kill someone up at your gas station. So now you have no efficiency, and people lose their fucking minds, And if the United States gains 20 times more in defense and intelligence than the next 16 industrialized nations behind us, so if we have a war, it's not going to be kinetic. It'll be something like that, like the COVID vaccine, or it will be, or the filtered outbreak, or it will be power outages. Where it will be an acceleration thing where you have mass chaos on the streets. That's just a key click. Am I worried about Al Qaeda walking into my house? No. For ISIS? No. I'm worried about what we'll do to ourselves.
How can you beat that though? How can you prepare for that? How can you beat it?
Well, through a logistical learning, the guy who reached out to me to provide home protection, his company's valuation went up from 2023 from $220 million a year to $2 billion in 2020. So it went up that high. And I'm scratching my head. I don't know anything about that shit. But I'm scratching my head about it, and I'm thinking, why did it go up so much? So the reason why this went up so much is because Trump started legislation to stop transporting the Chinese transformers. Finally got into office, and that legislation never got passed. Then when Trump got elected, but did not taken office, they had not taken office yet. Uh, they knew that these were put into place, stop importing Chinese transformers. So that made everything in North America, in Africa's not even making, but made everything in North America, the transformer manufacturers' prices go through the roof. That's why this guy needed protection, because his valuation just went up tenfold. So, and then we've not had any transformer issues since then. And I'm not the spokesperson for transformers. I'm barely making them out, but I'm saying that number one, that's how you stop that. Let's don't allow, if we look to prevent accelerationism, then avoiding the chaos in the United States and a race war is number one. Some of my closest friends are not white, dude. So, as I love everybody, also hate everybody. So, my point to that is, last thing we in the United States is chaos and a race war. What in these countries in the world, we outside of a few other countries, but one of the wealthiest, but definitely the superpower of the world. So that number one is us avoid us destroying ourselves. Number two is is making yourself a hard target. And I'm not saying be the guy who's always walking around carrying a gun or being the guy who's always paranoid, but if you keep your doors locked at night and you know your neighbors don't, and if you don't have a dog and you don't present presence that reflects that I'm not the guy you're gonna fuck with. If and I'm not saying that to, when it's like I'm a badass or something. I'm saying it to a practical. If you don't pay attention, maintain situational awareness, and if you don't have a means to defend yourself, whether it's your house, your thief, a joy, if you don't have the means to do that, then you are going to be a target. And it's something like accelerationism in the United States to get occur, and people look at you as a soft hearted, and it's your own fault. You set yourself up for it. So that's how you defeat it.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Uh, Let me focus a little bit onto the personal part of it. You've been in positions where more lines can blur. How do you personally define the ethical sort of limits of intelligence work?
If you're getting into this business, you have to acknowledge that there's a huge difference between good and bad and right. Right and wrong is a construct. Good and bad is for good. To get into this, you have to recognize that it's required. They don't tell you this, but you know what for God, that you have to have moral elasticity. It is what it is. And so you have to have that, but then you also have to recognize and keep a constant governor on yourself about, am I about to, is that moral elasticity? Is it about to snap? If you have to get to the point where you're able to recognize that and then detour from that and find a way out of, am I about to do something that breaks my own personal constitution? And a lot of times the right thing is the bad thing, and the good thing is the wrong thing. And always I believe, and it's not right or wrong, man. It's good or bad. Because if you go overseas and you do something that is illegal in the United States, but is illegal in that country, but that is a means to that run, then you do it. Knowing full well that if you were to do whatever it is you have to do to achieve the objective, that you'd probably get arrested in the United States for that concern, to maintain your boundaries, your guardrail on your moral upliftment.
Moral elasticity. How do you decompress after carrying the weight of moral elasticity? Because I mean, you can find yourself in life and death situations, and it could cost heavily, it could take a toll. I mean, every human can make a mistake. How do you decompress from all of that?
For me, it's not hard. And trust me, I've gotten more wrong than I've understand. But, and I've seen people die. I've had to be fucked up shit with people. But I saw a kid die alone. And it definitely got between my ears. I don't know him. I mean, this guy, you want more of my homies. We were doing some showering, and this kid drowned. And so I had to work out. I went to work on him, but I thought he was going to live. I really did. But he didn't like it out. But I remember driving home some work that day, and I pulled up. Look at that kid, yeah. Pulled up front of the house. and it was October '95. It's cold out on the shores of North Carolina. And my wife and I pulled up front with a big window in front of the house. And my wife was standing next to the stove. And she was cooking a pie of chili. I mean, I was going to go home and done some chili, better do some beer, and some chili. And, it was on a Friday, as a matter of fact. I didn't have anything to do in that game. And I was sitting there and it hit me, man. After I this kid died, I still remember his name, where he's from. And I didn't even know the guy. The only reason why I remember that is because he came out on paper. But I just broke down and started crying, man. And at that point, I told myself that you're a grown ass man. If you're not emotional flesh to handle this, go be a banker. Go be an accountant. Go yourself for else. But if you're on emotional quick to normal this, and it was maybe a 2-minute conversation with myself where if you're not emotionally quick to handle this, and it's not compartmentalizing anything like that, it's just recognizing the reality of what your chosen profession is. If you're not emotional quick to handle this, go find another fucking job, dude. And I love my job so much that I was able to recognize that and have a dramatized amount of conversation with myself. And it's not something that I struggle with. Doing something, it's a marijuana job, or again, having to do shit that I would not want anybody to have to do. Doing things like that is part of the job. And
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. But decompressing must always be a little bit hard. I guess.
that conversation I had with myself, doing that, and, five explosions, put all those cash stuff, putting out functions, all that shit, what a job. I get affected more by seeing my son fall off the skateboard or hitting a hard hit at football. That impacts me more than the hazards that come with occupation. Because anytime when I'm doing something occupational, typically I prepared for the event and acknowledge the outcome of it. And so it is what it is. Did I do my best on this? To prepare for it. But like I said, if so I can walk back from that and say, no, you get everything into it. But gravity's a bitch. Seeing my son fall off a skateboard, no, dude, I can't control that. Someone get a kid hitting on the football field, I can't control that either. So that impacts me more through a psychological perspective and emotional perspective than the occupational thing. Again, I'm 53 years old. I'm doing this stuff at 34, 35, and was that. So it's just, you don't become callous to it. You become aware of the implications and the consequences of your actions, and you accept that. So for me, as soon as I step off the choir, that decompression, I don't have to. It's not okay.
Got it. Got it. We're running up a little bit on time, so I have 3 more questions for you. All right. The first one is the role of LLMs and AI in counterterrorism. Sorry, and intelligence overall. What role do you think it will play? And do you think human intuition is still better than AI and LLMs, or do you think eventually they will take over that concept of human intuition in intelligence and security? It's an honest answer.
But with AI at the rate that it's exponential now. My daughter is about to start law school, and she reached out. She was writing her thesis paper for school. Yeah, she reached out, and I didn't chat GPT, reading AI verse, and she sends me the paper. I was an English major in the college, and her throwing was on global issues. So I'm looking at, and I know a little bit about global issues. So I'm looking at through the global issue is the context, the content, and then also I'm looking for relevant sentences and shit like that. So I'm looking at all that. So I did my edits and I'll set it back to her, and I was like, hey dude, if you feel if this is your jam, I admit if you think that some of the things I'm putting in were a defeatable honor or were not told you, take it out or punt it back to me. Anyway, she dug it. She submitted a paper, and they had professor firms that they put it through whatever Chat GPT AI program they use. They said it was 90% AI derived. And so she hits me back and she tells me that. I was like, the fuck it was, dude. We spent like 4 hours working on that thing, and none of us looked at that stuff. So I think that the more that we been young to AI, the more AI knows our proclivities. And I think that
it's increasing at such an exponential rate that I don't know, man. I mean, should it be used? 100%. Should it be harnessed? A million percent. So I don't know. I don't know. We got harnessed it before it harnesses us, and we're on that road right now.
All right, fair enough. Fair enough. If it helps, though, I know a lot of people that didn't use AI in their papers, and a lot of them got flagged for AI. So just a proactive heads up. It's a common phenomenon.
Yeah, it's, I mean, what do you do? I mean, there's no such thing as an original thought.
Yeah, there isn't. There is.
I don't know if you've ever read The Art of War by Sun Tzu.
Sanju. Yeah, I actually have a copy right over here.
Yeah, well, right up there. But no, I think one of the things, well, I know I'm impressed with how it murdered, but he said no flame goes undefeated. Because if you and me, is when I was going to go do something, and I'm like, hey, we should do it like this. And I have your mama and the best plan on the planet, and you're looking at it, and you're like, what we can improve here?
Yeah.
Kind of Sun Tzu's, one of his premises in that book, which is a phenomenal book. I would encourage everyone to read that book just for practical life, not for around the governance to knuckles or something like that. But I think it's a phenomenal book, and I think that when you said about AI and people being critiqued on their papers, and they say it's AI. Well, shit, there's no such thing as a original thought. And I think you have to look at that through objective or not fascinating.
You know what really impresses me about that book, and thank you for bringing it into the AI. I'm just more of a philosopher, so I went back to the book. What really impresses me about that book is that I've read The Art of War by Machiavelli, I read The Art of War by Clausewitz, and I read The Art of War by Sanju, and all three say pretty much the exact same thing in different wording. So Sanju is the simplest of that wording, and it's an amazing book, and I agree with you. And I'm very surprised that you're a big fan of it. But yeah, that's kind of my take on AI as well. It's you got to be a little bit more prepared and whatnot. Sorry, small sidetrack, forget it. But let me ask something else. When it comes to counterterrorism and sort of designing for the next generation or choosing the next generation specialists, what skills or traits are non-negotiable?
I think the most important thing right now is you can teach a monkey how to gunfight. You can teach a monkey how to fist fight or to rather fight. I think the most important thing is cultural awareness. And I'm more than nature versus nurture, but you have to make those things. It's software. But cultural awareness, as I think, is paramount. It's paramount, basically, is that Iraq and Iraq. The best way to not lose a fight is to not be into the fight. So if we can handle a situation that bonusing to diplomatically, let's go that route, man. And when I do protective work, again, when I started doing that, I'd already had 15 years between special operations and counterterrorism. And when I started, I was in mid-career high. You put a guy through a course. It's generally levelly forced. You come through it, and then you sit them out, man, the governor may have a badge. And they're immediately, and again, a monkey can make shit pass this forward. But they immediately go out and make things. I'm CA. I can do whatever I've done to be. Show these guys, man. I would see them do it. We used to go on the floor, traveling over students. We can get them White House every morning, and they would treat everybody like shit. And I'm like, hey, dude, you got to restore something, Lord. You guys need to work on your soft skills. You need to slap one in the court. A jury's not going to convict somebody they like. They're not going to quit somebody they dislike. So you have to work on your soft skills, because if your soft skills fail, what do you have to rely on? Your odds to it. So you got to fist fight and gunfight. And you know what? You fucking nerds can't fist fight more gunfight. Just because you have a badge, just because you have a gun, doesn't make you a badass. So be nice to people until it's time to not be. But be culturally aware and know that we all want the same things. And at the end of the day, the board ground, we look for our children to live happy and healthy. That when we want the same thing for us. And if we don't have that, it's sure not going to diffuse down into our kids. So that's what we need. So I think cultural awareness is one of the biggest things. And along with that is knowing yourself. But if you're an asshole, I'm an asshole. But if I'm an asshole to myself, I'm not an asshole for other people. But so you'd have to acknowledge that, man. Recognize other people, recognize what their worth is, recognize what their value is, and the more you know about something, the more you know how little you know about it. And know yourself, and put yourself in the other people's shoes, And I think
Banju, over there. Know thyself.
in any realm, you need to be doing intelligence or you need to be choosing the or not try. But if you recognize their value and you be kind of them, it's going to be reciprocal.
Okay, I agree. My final question to you, and it's not so much of a question. If you go back in time and give yourself one piece of advice, or if you would have to advise the newest generation on something, what would that one piece be? What would be that one piece of advice you'd want to give them or yourself?
Put others before yourself. You proud of them. Also be aware and know how to take care of yourself. Know how to take care of others. And I like to use qualifiers, but I will always say, I'm not in the business of getting somebody to pass. But in this situation, I have to put myself in their shoes and see what their approach is was. And just say no. I think one of the situations, one of the key things I would say is under promise, over deliver, be kind, and know yourself and recognize your moral elasticity.
Done. I think that's all.